This afternoon, we have Dr. Maurice Clifton. He's the Associate Dean for Admissions and Student Affairs at Mercer University School of Medicine. And Dr. Clifton is going to discuss options and strategies for applicants who don't get into medical school the first time they apply. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Maurice Clifton.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to thank you that are here in the audience for coming to see about this for your friends, right? Because, you know, obviously it's not going to be you that's not going to get in. And same thing for you at home. Couple things starting out. As you think of questions, for the people here, we've got two sizes of cards. Big card is for sort of the story of your friend, right? A scenario of somebody who didn't get into medical school or is worried that they're not going to get into medical school. And the small one is just for general questions about anything. So you can go ahead and fill those out as we're going through these. Kind of overall plan for this session is about 15 minutes or so of kind of giving you my view as an admissions dean about what you should do if you don't get into medical school or if you're worried about not getting into medical school. And then about 15 minutes of talking about scenarios. What if somebody is, you know, has this and this and this, what should they do? And then 15 minutes for questions. So to start off with, I've got kind of a little joke thing. 5 things not to do when you don't get into medical school. So for those of you in the audience here, you have to laugh really loud so that they think that it's funny, you know, online. So number 5 thing, wait to get accepted. That's not really funny. It's funny to me because it's whenever I hear somebody say this, it just kills me because that shouldn't exist. Like the idea of waiting to get accepted, if you learn one thing from this talk, is not to do that. You got to keep making your application better. If it looks like you're just waiting to get accepted, you won't get in. The next one, argue with the Dean of Admissions about why you should get in. I've had that happen a lot. That's why it's funny to me because, you know, people come in and say, oh, but I did this and I did this and I did this. And it's like, well, that's fine, but you got to take responsibility for your application. You got to, you know, you're the one that's trying to get into medical school. You need to convince us, okay? And arguing about it isn't going to make a difference. It's actually going out and doing things that are going to prove that point. Sue the school because you are too short, tall, dark, old, young, whatever, right? That approach doesn't work. You're not going to make any friends. You really want to be part of the group, not somebody that's kind of forcing their way in. Blame your advisor. That's probably the best one up here. You can do that. Another one, give other people advice on getting into medical school on studentdoctor.net. Studentdoctor.net has a lot of great things about it, but what I tell applicants that are having trouble getting in is that it seems like, to me, it's mostly students who didn't get into medical school giving advice to other students who didn't get into medical school, okay? So you know, try and find people that are real credible. So here's what I see as the 2 options if you don't get in. First one, give up. Hopefully that's not really an option, but I do want to talk about that a tiny bit. And then the second one is keep trying, okay, and figuring out how to make your application better. So things that I think of as giving up, and don't throw stuff at me, applying to DO schools, absolutely. Going to a DO school, you can go to residency programs, you can be a physician. In my last position, there were 5 physicians and 2 of us were DOs. I have a lot of respect for DOs, but it's harder to get into, it's my opinion, that it's harder to get into competitive programs from a DO school. Okay, all the schools will say, but we have people that get into orthopedics or get into, you know, ENT. The tops of those schools, the top students in those schools get into real competitive programs, but the average students in MD programs get into those programs. Does that make sense? So it's, as I see it, getting into an MD school is kind of an investment in your future. PA school. Now the great thing about PA school is once you get in, you're going to graduate, you know, just like DO and MD schools. You'll be a practitioner. You can do a lot of different things. You don't have the autonomy as of medical students, but it can be a fantastic profession. And so I don't mean this is given up like in the grand sense, but it's given up on getting into an MD school. Caribbean schools, is again, it's my opinion that that's going to be a harder and harder route to take. As the U.S. schools ramp up and as they expand, the residency positions aren't expanding yet. And so it seems to me that the Caribbean school graduates are going to be the first ones to get kind of squeezed out of the residency market. The other thing is that some of the schools will talk about their great pass rates on the boards, on the USMLE Step 1. What they generally don't tell you is how many people pass using the denominator of how many people start. Okay, in most U.S. medical schools, essentially everybody that starts medical school takes the boards, and 90-something% pass. In the Caribbean schools, there's some that only a third of them actually make it through to take the boards. So there's kind of a winnowing out process that happens then. Okay, to talk about keep trying. So the rest of the talk will be positive. Figure out what your weakness is and fix it, okay? Sounds real easy when you boil it down that way. The other way is make sure you're applying to the right school for you, okay? So just from the people out here, what does it take to be a good physician? Think of doctors you've been to, you know, you can think of doctors that aren't so good or whatever, but what does it take to be a good physician? Just yell stuff out. Patience. Patience, absolutely.
And devoted to your career?
Devotion, sure, right. What else? Good communicator, okay. Good relationships, good. Knowledgeable, absolutely. Smart, okay.
Good team player?
Absolutely. Compassion, okay. So, this is our list, okay. I think you got most of them. Couple down here, I don't know if this pointer is going to work or not, if this is a pointer. Oops, sorry, what did I just do? Understanding the healthcare system is one that you guys didn't mention, but that's all part of being a good physician because it's difficult to maneuver through it. Motivation, leadership, teamwork, all that stuff is up there. What you want to do is show that you've got that stuff already, okay? Big picture, that's what you have to convince us. You got to convince us that you're smart enough, that you understand what medicine's about, that you really want to help people, okay? So if it's academics, if that's your weakness, you got to convince us that you'll be able to do the first year curriculum in whatever school you're going to, okay? Some of them are set up to handle people that have an average of, on the MCAT, of 27 or something. Others are set up to have people with an average of 36. You know, the curriculum is going to be a lot different in those two schools. Understanding medicine, do you really know what you're getting into? And do you really, you know, how have you proved to yourself that medicine is what you want to do? If it's, I got a doctor's kit when I was 5 years old and ever since I've wanted to be a doctor, you know, that's not really going to cut it, right? What is it as an adult that you like about medicine? Do you want to help people, and how can you show that that's something that's just really strongly ingrained in your personality? And then I put this on there because every once in a while somebody gets to the interview and they really are crazy. But if you think of those things that, you know, we talked about as being a good doctor, crazy doesn't really, you know, work. I mean, that kind of gets in between interpersonal relationships, all of that kind of stuff. So again, for all your friends that are crazy that are trying to get into med school, you can help them out there. So make sure you're applying to the right school. There's each school has kind of a different niche. They have some different ways to figure out what they are about, but they all want to produce a little bit different type of person, type of physician. They're looking for different types of people to come in order to produce that. And then state residency requirements make a big difference, as you guys know. So here's just some different examples. I took this out of the MSAR book. Do you guys all know about this? So it's the Medical School Admission Requirement book. It's done by the AAMC. It's actually a fantastic book. The first half is just advice on how to get in, things like that. Then the last about 2/3 or so is 2 pages on every school in the country, okay, including Puerto Rico. So a lot of really good information. This is totally written by them. This is an ad, okay? First page is an ad. And then the second page are numbers that the AAMC gets from the application process, okay? So it's kind of a, the first part is definitely an ad, but the second part is objective data that's gathered objectively. So University of Pittsburgh, fantastic school. I worked there for about 8 years. Their mean GPA is 3.8. They're pretty tight range. Their mean MCAT score was a 36 in this year's MCAT, MSAR. So pretty competitive place, right? Okay. This is where I am now, Mercer University School of Medicine. Average MCAT is about a 28. Okay, big difference. The range is pretty wide, 24 to 33. Ponce School of Medicine, I know some people that work there. Their average is a 22. Okay. And the Commonwealth Medical College, has anybody heard of that? Couple nods. So it's a new school up in Northeast Pennsylvania, in Scranton, Pennsylvania, yeah, where they filmed The Office. So that's actually where I'm going to be working in a few weeks. Their average is 30, and they also have quite a range. It's a new school, so they only have 2 classes so far, right? So it's brand new. Okay, so here's the mission statement. Can you guys read that in here? So the mission of X is to educate physicians who are science-based, skilled, compassionate clinicians prepared to meet the challenges of practicing medicine in the 21st century and to conduct cutting-edge biomedical research that is focused on bettering the human condition and advancing the fundamental understanding of medical science. So which of those previous schools does that sound like? The first one, yeah, University of Pittsburgh. Exactly, with the 36 MCATs. They really want you to come in understanding research, and they want you to go back to, you know, stay in that research community. Okay, X, this is a school, will educate aspiring physicians and scientists to serve society using a community-based, patient-centered, interprofessional, and evidence-based model of education that is committed to inclusion, promotes discovery, and utilizes innovative techniques. Which one do you think that is? The middle range? Okay, yes, one of the ones in the middle range.
Was it the one with like the 22 MCAT?
No, it wasn't. No, but that's a good guess. It's the Commonwealth one. Brand new school. They're saying we want to do things different. We want to do things cutting edge. We want to, you know, stay right on that edge of educating people in the best way using things like evidence-based medicine and sort of innovative educational techniques, okay? So this one, as its mission, the provision of high-quality education and graduate training which shall strengthen students' character, moral fiber, ethics, prepare physicians and scientists for a fast-changing world in the area of healthcare delivery and research. So what does that sound like? Second one, that's the Ponce one. You know, they do talk about research in there, but it really is more about taking care of patients. You can kind of see it's more, it sounds nicer, right? Does that kind of make sense? Okay, then the mission of X is to educate physicians and health professionals to meet the primary care and healthcare needs of rural and medically underserved areas of the state. That's the other one. Yeah, good. So that's Mercer, where I am now, okay? And so our mission is to produce physicians for rural and underserved Georgia. Okay, so the best way to do that is to accept applicants from rural and underserved Georgia, right? So each one of these is doing that same thing. Pitt accepts people that have done a lot of research, hoping that they'll go back to do research. We accept people from rural and underserved Georgia, hoping that they go back to rural and underserved Georgia. Okay, so how do you find out, you know, how all these schools work? Basically, go to the MSAR. You know, you can read through. You kind of can read in between the lines. Go to their website. See what their curriculum is. our curriculum at Mercer has a big chunk that's community medicine, where you go out into the community, you learn how to do community projects. We spend about the same amount of time that Pitt does teaching how to do research. Okay, so you can kind of see how that works. If you're not a good fit, it's going to be, it just makes it more difficult. Okay, to talk about states a little bit, this is UCLA's data from the MSAR. You can see they get a ton of applications, right? A ton. Even 5,000 California applications, they interview like 10% of that, right? So that's just a really tough thing to get into. Non-residents, a few but not many, right? Less than 10% of their whole class. So if you're not a California resident, you got to be just spectacular to get in there. Here's University of Pittsburgh. Yeah, sure.
So 167 matriculated, how many offers of admission?
They don't tell. Yeah. That's one of those weird numbers where the more prestigious you are, sometimes your acceptance rate goes down because they're getting into other prestigious schools and they kind of, spread out. Ours, does that make sense? So ours, we don't.
Doesn't or nobody discloses that?
It's not in the MSAR, and I doubt they would disclose it. I don't know. I haven't looked. So University of Pittsburgh has a different population. You can see that they're looking for people to do research. So most of their students are from out of state. Okay, 2/3. Here's Mercer. We're a private school, but we only accept Georgia residents. Okay, 63% of our graduates after training are practicing in Georgia. Right, that's why we're there, and so that's why we do that. Commonwealth Schools is kind of a mixture. It's mostly in-state students, but it's a new school, so their whole applications. This was a couple years ago, but their total number of applications isn't that big. And then Creighton is a private school in Nebraska where they got very few in-state applications, a ton of out-of-state applications, but they're also taking most of their class from out of state. Yes?
So you're really interested in these in-state, and you have to be a resident of this state's university. How long do you have to be a resident of that?
That's a great question. So at Mercer, I've heard the admissions committee say stuff like, this person's only been in the state for 8 years. How do we know that they're going to stay? Okay, and they're really looking for, at Mercer, the admissions committee is looking for roots. They want your parents to be there. They want you to, if you have a farm in rural Georgia, that's a big positive thing. I'm kind of joking, but not really so much. That they really want to see that you've got strong ties to come back to there. Every school is going to be a little bit different, but it's not just a matter of being, filling out the form and being able to say that you're in the state. Are you writing down questions as we're going through this? Okay. Okay, so we can talk about scenarios now. So I've got to start off. Yeah.
Dr. Clifton?
Yes.
Can I just want to
Sure.
before we go into the exercise, there's a lot of activity on Twitter right now on the Twitter feed.
Okay.
In regards to the statement that you made about DO schools.
Yes.
Could you provide just a little bit more clarification around the what you mean by student who applies to an MD granting school doesn't get in, then possibly considers a DO granting school? What do you mean by giving up? Is that something that you're looking at more from a philosophical perspective of someone who's primarily interested in an MD granting program but now looking at a DO versus someone who's fundamentally interested in osteopathy and is pursuing admissions to an osteopathic program?
Yeah. So a few things. I'm not talking about people that really like the philosophy of a DO school and osteopathy, and I don't see that as giving up at all. I do talk to a fair number of applicants that come in and after 2 or 3 rounds of applying, they say, okay, well, I'm going to go to a DO school, or I'm going to go to an offshore school or something like that. That's kind of what I'm talking about. I think, like as I said before, I have a lot of respect for DOs. I think that good DOs are as good MDs. You know, I think the farther you go out, the less difference it makes what you are. And for the most part, you might have a certificate up on your wall that says you're from a DO school or an MD school, but you do the same things. I worked for a DO school at one point. So I'm talking about it in those terms of just, if your goal is an MD school and you're you know, giving up in order to, and applying to DO school, first of all, you're not, DO schools hate that, and for good reason. I mean, they want people that are going there for, because of the philosophy of the DO school. And whatever you do, don't say that in the application that you're, you know. I think, does that, we'll see if that answered the question. Yeah, I don't, I mean, any disrespect at all. But I think that, and I don't have a lot of data because there isn't a lot of data out there that's easy to get. But in general, I think it's more difficult to get into competitive residency programs from a DO school, population-wise, than from an MD school. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. But some people, you know, if an MD, if the philosophy of an MD school is what you believe in, it's going to be easier to get into a competitive program from that route.
Great, thanks. I'm sure we'll see some additional follow-up questions coming in via
that's
Twitter.
fine.
So.
Okay, so so let's do the first scenario. So this is an applicant who was applied as a junior in college, went to a really difficult school, so it was a real competitive college, had a 3.2 GPA, which was a little bit above average but for that school, but below average for the applicant pool. 32 in the MCAT, so okay, but not so great that it sort of you know, erased concerns about the GPA. Had no volunteering experience, had no clinical experience. Okay, applied to the top like about 10 schools in the country. So, do you think that person got in? Okay, you're right. So that was me. That was my first application. So I'm going to blame it on my advisor. Okay, my advisor was a great guy, but we didn't really have a pre-med advisor. I mean, in terms of it was Harvey Mudd College, fantastic college. At that time, didn't graduate a lot of people into medical school, so we kind of had to figure it out on our own, and that's what I did. Didn't know about the MSAR, didn't know about anything, really. So I shouldn't have gotten in. So what did I do? I got some clinical experience. I moved in back home with mom and dad, volunteered full-time for the Red Cross, and did about 40 hours a week in a VA school, a VA hospital, and then I taught Red Cross classes, all volunteer for 6 months. And then I did Peace Corps. And so basically those two things got me into my state school, which is University of Washington in Seattle. So didn't have to retake the MCAT, didn't have to take more classes, but I just kind of packed it in like that. Okay, so who's got another scenario? Do we have any scenarios from, or are they still yelling at me for the DO comment?
I think, well, you know, oftentimes we hear from students who have, who present profiles pretty similar to what you see there, although perhaps, you know, we oftentimes will talk with a student whose GPA is maybe even a little bit lower, like a 3.0, and maybe a 29 or a 30 on the MCAT. But what they do have going for them is the volunteer work and clinical experience. And the question that oftentimes comes up is, on balance, is the volunteer work and are the clinical experiences and maybe even the research, is that going to make up for a low MCAT score and a GPA that's middling at best?
Yeah, so I guess I would answer that by saying yes and no. So, so each school is going to have kind of a rough idea of how much science you need to know to be able to handle their first year curriculum. Okay, for Mercer it's kind of one level. For University of Pittsburgh it's another level, right? Every school is going to have their idea. If you're below that threshold, then it's going to be really tough to get in no matter what. If you're above it, then it really is kind of more. I mean, it's holistic all the way through. But they start taking into account those other things. And you know, we've turned down people for interviews that had 37 on the MCAT just because nothing in their application said anything about rural and underserved, you know, primary care in Georgia. You know, it just, you look at it and you said, there's no way they're going to complete our mission. And so, you know, we don't interview them. So yeah, so I think for the other thing you got to remember is that there's a lot of competition out there. And when you look at stuff on paper and when you interview, when you're kind of reading over interview descriptions and stuff, everybody's really great. Everybody's done amazing things. You know, you guys are all working really hard. And so if they have to decide between two people that have tons of outside experiences and stuff, and one looks like an academic risk and the other one doesn't, you know, they're going to take the one that doesn't. And for the most part, still, even though we've increased the class sizes by 30%, it's still a really competitive process. We increased our class size from 60 to 100 over the last 3 years. And the MCAT scores, GPAs, are virtually the same. But we're not, you know, we don't have to sort of take people that are more in an academic risk. There's just lots of people out there applying for medical school.
One question that has come in through the Twitter feed is about the timeliness of submission of the application and what negative impact that has on the ultimate admissions decision. Here we are, early October. There's been one school for which the primary application, as far as I can remember, the deadline has passed, but a lot of schools have October 15th deadlines, November 1st deadlines. So we're coming up very close on those deadlines. Is it too late at this point? Realistically speaking, what is a student's chance if they're submitting a primary application at this point?
So the question is basically, if you're at home finishing up AMCAS and that's why you're not here, you know, should you just pack it up and wait for? No, I think go ahead and, you know, turn it in, get it done. But it's just going to be harder and harder. The way it works at Mercer is we have a big early decision program, and there's for various reasons. But it basically, we take about, this year we took almost half our class from early decision. And so the admissions committee interviewed a bunch of people. They said, okay, this person right here, that person we really want in the class. The people below them, we not so much right yet. You know, they look pretty good, but you know, the people above that we got to have. So they accepted all those students. What'll happen is we'll go in. We've got about 50 spots left. So we've got about 5 meetings, one every month until March. And so I'll go into the admissions committee and I'll say, okay, you know, we've now interviewed 50 students or applicants, and if you divide out the spots evenly for the rest of the year, you can admit 10, and that'll work out, you know, just kind of spread it out. And so what they'll do is they'll admit 13 because those 3 between, you know, 11, 12, and 13 are just really great, and they would have gotten in if they had applied early decision, right? So then the next time we could admit 5, and the next time 7, and they sort of keep over admitting. And by the last time, there's 4 spots, and you got to be spectacular to, you know, to get in among those 4. So basically the bar just kind of gets artificially raised higher and higher as you go through the admissions cycle. If you are a rural, if you're going to add diversity to our class, so if you're a minority kid or disadvantaged in whatever way, and you're from, you know, a long-standing family in Georgia and all that kind of stuff, and you apply at the very end, we're looking for those and we're trying to kind of move you up to the front of the line. But at schools that don't do that, I mean, it's going to be pretty tough. Makes a big difference. Part of it is just that timing. The spots leave. Part of it, honestly, is, you know, we want people that are organized, that are going to, you know, they're going to make deadlines, that are, you know, on the ball, that sort of thing. And it looks like you're not if you're applying this late.
So what should a student do when they don't get in for that year between the first application and the second application? What should students be focusing on to make themselves stronger applicants?
So it was that slide that was about, I don't know if I can go back to it real easily. Let's see. So figure out why you didn't get in. You know, if it's timing, you can fix that for the next time. But again, you got to make your application a little bit better. If it's academics, take some more science classes. Take something that's going to make them think that you can do the curriculum. So you talked about kind of a GPA. We don't look at just GPAs. We look at what GPA you had each year. We look at what grades you got in each class. We know what are the hard classes at the big state school, and we know what to expect. So we really honestly look at each class and each grade. If there's a pattern of doing really well in the humanities but not doing very well in science, that worries us. If you go to Georgia Tech, though, another really competitive school, and you're an engineering major, and you get a C in P-Chem and thermodynamics, I mean, who cares, right? Because that's not really what we're going to be doing, in medical school. As long as you got A's and B's in immunology and genetics, that sort of thing. So it's not just the GPA. If it's doing an MPH is a great thing if you already have the academics, but you need to sort of bring something else into your application and say you really have an interest in, public health. That can be a real positive thing. If you're doing an MPH because you think you can get a 4.0 and that's going to help your GPA, that's not going to help you get in, right? Because it's not they're totally different classes. You got to convince them that you can handle that first year class. Again, if you're this are you crazy at the end? That's probably I probably shouldn't have said that, but if you're not good in interviews, okay, if you're too shy or quiet, or if you just don't interact, real well, go out and learn how to do that. Go out and get a job. Be a bartender. Be I joke about another joke that'll get me in trouble, but I joke about being like a customer service rep at Walmart. Like, wow, now there's a tough job, trying to take people that are upset and make them happy, right? If you can learn and get really good at that, you'll do really good in an interview. Find a place where you're going to be meeting the general public and talking to them and trying to get to know them, right? That'll come off in interviews.
Another really good question that has come in is, in the process of reapplying, when it comes time to request and submit letters of recommendation, is there value in seeking a letter from someone who wrote a letter for you originally, or should you seek out new letter writers in the hopes that there would be a different perspective or there would be a different strength to the letter?
Yeah, so letters of recommendation in reapplicants, I would say both. So you want to get, if you have a connection with somebody that wrote a letter for you last year, and you can go back to them and say, okay, in this last year, here's what I've done. they can write a letter that's even stronger than last year. So that's a positive thing. If you go out and do research, at a university, at a different university, and then you don't have a letter from that person, that looks kind of weird, right? So kind of think of it from our side, and what's going to help us know that we're getting a full picture of what you're doing out there.
I have a question. So if you failed the first time and you want, as that gentleman say that we want to find a like to get a letter back from the same person. So how do we ask them to write another one, or should we suppose just use the old one? Which one is better?
Yeah, I personally don't like seeing old letters because it makes me think that you don't have a relationship with that person, and they really don't know you. Because if they really knew you and they really thought you'd be a good doctor, they'd write another letter. Does that make sense? I would just go back to them and say, I'm applying again. Here's what I've done. Can you write me another, really strong letter for medical school? There's obviously difficult situations where if you're on the other side of the country or, whatever, it might not be easy to just kind of go in. But call them, talk to them, email, something. Did you have?
Yeah, I guess with the letters of recommendation, our pre-med advisor says that one of them should be from the medical health field, like a doctor, like getting a reference from a doctor or something like that. Would you say the same? Because like I know in my position, like even though I intern at a hospital, we don't really have a lot of interaction with the doctors themselves. So
Yeah.
how does that?
Yeah, so the question is, how do you get a letter from a clinical person, or is that important, and how do you do it? Yeah, so I think it is important. There's a couple ways to look at it, okay? The pessimistic side of me, if I don't see a letter and you've spent 1,000 hours volunteering at a hospital, makes me think that you didn't get to meet any physicians, makes me think that you were giving water to patients and doing stuff, where you really weren't kind of seeing what medicine's about. Okay, so that may or may not be true, but that's when I got 800 applications to wade through. That's kind of what I'm going to think. So that's where you got to use all your resources. Talk to your family's doctor, your pediatrician, just start building kind of a network of physicians. Start with people that you know or that somebody else knows, and get to know them, and then as they start getting, kind of tired of you, then ask them for a couple of their friends that you can shadow, or just kind of gradually build out your resource until you find somebody that's really going to write you a good letter. Doctors are pretty quick at making judgments on people. That's kind of their job, really. And so you don't have to work with someone for a real long time for them to figure out whether you got good interpersonal skills with their patients. They're going to be very protective of their patients. If they trust you and they let you go in and talk to the patients beforehand, or if you really help them out, that's all they're going to need to write that letter. It doesn't mean you have to spend 1,000 hours with them, okay? But you have to have some sort of meaningful relationship with them. Okay, yeah.
Let's say that after the first interview and you fail and you don't know exactly what's your weaknesses from there, because after that no one exactly tell you like what you should improve from the interviewer's perspective. So how do you know what you should improve when you don't really see the problem in your application?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a great answer. That's a lot of what I do as an admissions dean, is helping people figure that out. If your advisor is really knowledgeable, they may be able to help you. I would definitely contact the school where you interviewed to see if they could give you some feedback, because I think it is difficult sometimes to figure out. I think that when it's the academics, when it's kind of your experiences, that's pretty easy. If you don't have it, okay, go out and get it. If there's difficulties in the interview, that can be that's hard feedback to give, and it may not be, you know, something that, if you're only getting one interview, I would say don't worry about your interview skills. I talked to a guy a couple weeks ago that got 10 interviews last year, didn't get accepted to a single school. Okay, so on that end of the spectrum, something's going on in the interviews that isn't right, you know? And in his case, he has a really high MCAT, and he's waiting to get accepted. He's done nothing since he got that high MCAT. He's just kind of coasting. And that came across really quickly, and we don't want coasters in medical school. There's no coasting in medical school.
All right, well, with that piece of advice, don't coast along. We will end our discussion here. We want to thank Dr. Maurice Clifton, Associate Dean for Admissions and Student Affairs at Mercer University School of Medicine, for his time and expertise, sharing with us some great advice for how to pursue and be persistent in our pursuit of our professional goals.